Recently, I was working on building a small console application to basically do background removals from images. If you go to my GitHub, specifically github.com/StephenFreeborn/BGR, you can find it. But essentially, all this app does is it takes an image as an input. It uses some machine learning models to run inferences on that image and then remove the background from the image and then write that image with the background removed to your disk. So not a complex app, but more importantly, what I wanted to show you guys today was a very, what I think is clever solution to a problem I ran into that uses the often forgot about power that is in your csproj file. At least I really forget about it, because a lot of times I think of the csproj file as purely a place to define dependencies or assembly information, but it's actually really a build script, and so we can use it to do nifty things like what I'm going to show you here. So the issue I was having is, in order for this application to be easy and convenient for me to distribute, I wanted to be able to package the actual machine learning models that I was using in the application as embedded resources in the app. And so the way I did this was I actually created a resource folder and then a files folder, and then I actually put my machine learning models in the Onyx format in my repo. Initially, I thought this would work great, and all I did was I just defined on my csproj file and an embedded resource attribute, and then just included all the files in that particular directory. The problem was, though, is that these machine learning models are actually quite big in terms of an embedded resource. There are some of them, the largest of which I think is almost half a gig, just shy of a half a gig. So it's not really realistic for me to actually include these into my project's repo and push them up to something like GitHub. They're just too large. They exceed the file limit. And so I had to come up with a solution that would allow me to still embed these files at build time, so embed them as part of my CI/CD pipeline, embed them as part of my build when I'm developing locally, but not have to worry about going and remembering to actually get the models manually or having to do something really complex in my CI/CD pipeline to make this work. And my initial thought was, well, maybe I can write a small PowerShell script or a small shell script that will just go out, grab the models from some sort of static site, download them to the directory, to my resources /files directory, and then they'll be there. So when I build my project, the file's there, nothing to worry about, which would have worked fine. But I thought, man, I really don't want to have to maintain a separate script and then remember to use that script to build my project instead of just using the .NET CLI. And that's when I remembered, hey, there's these things called targets that I can use in the msbuild world in my csproj file to do things like this. And so I'm going to show you what I ended up coming up with. So the first thing I did was I actually went and put my machine learning models on a static site, just a plain static site where some files are hosted and I can get them through a URL. So let's go ahead and delete this files folder here with all the machine learning models in it. And looks like that may have made NeoVim angry. Let me quit out of this because NeoVim is very angry with my decision to delete all those files. And let's go back to the repository. Where were we? BGR? Yeah, BGR. Let's open this back up. And we should find now that my resources folder no longer has a file folder, which is great. But the problem is now if I try to build my project, it's going to say, whoa, hey, buddy, that's not going to work because you're asking me to embed these resources and those resources aren't there. Or in this case, it probably won't break. The models just won't be there because I'm actually getting the resource files through a glob. So the build will actually probably succeed. Let me actually try that really quick. The build will actually probably succeed, but if I'd actually run the application and try to actually get it to do what it does, it's probably not going to work correctly. So let's go back to BGR. Let's do .NET build. .NET build source. I swear, this is my project. I know how to work it. Yeah, so this is going to succeed. But if I was to actually run, so if I was to actually say .NET test source, so I was to actually try to use my application, some of my tests are going to pass, but they're not all going to pass. The tests that specifically depend on my model, or that model being there, you can see have all failed. So I have to come up with a solution to be able to get those model files at the time that I'm building the project. And this is where the targets aspect of msbuild and my csproj come into play. So what I can do is I can actually, at the time or just before I build, I can actually reach out to my static site and download those files just with a simple, again, shell command using curl. I'll curl, get those files, download them to the particular folder I'm interested in, including in my app, and then build my project after that's done. So let's go ahead and define that. So the first thing we need to put here is we need to put a property group. And the reason for this property group is I need to be able to specify where I want to download these files to, these files that are going to be embedded resources. And so I will declare a property group called download directory, and then I'm going to say resources /files, and then I'm going to close that tag like that. Thank you, Copilot. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a target. So in this case, my target is going to be named download files. Actually, let's change this to download models. That's more on brand. Then we're going to set our before targets, right? So this controls, hey, this target's going to run before this particular named target. And msbuild has a bunch of predefined targets, but in this case, I'm going to use prepare for build. Let's go ahead and close this. And now what I can do is inside my target, I can write all the things that I want to do before I actually build the project, right? To prepare for build. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to print a message. And that message is going to say text, downloading models. And I'll set the importance to high. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call makedir, which is a special attribute here that'll actually allow me to enforce that certain directories exist. So I'm going to say make sure that this download directory is there, but I'm going to specify a condition, which Copilot's already guessed for me, that basically says only do this if the download directory doesn't already exist, which is exactly what I want. So after that, now every time I build this project, I should now make sure that, hey, you actually have a files directory. So let's go ahead and test that. So write all this out. We'll go back to my other tab here. We'll say .NET build source. And you can see now if I go back to mvim, I should now have a files directory, but it's empty, right? Because I haven't actually downloaded those files. So the next thing we do is we need to actually go get the files. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 3 different exec commands. And each of these are going to go out and grab that model from my static site. So curl-l, and then because I'm in an XML file, I'm going to have to use some entities. So I'll say quotes, https share.stephenfreeborn.com/bgr/rmbg.onyx. And then we're going to out that to the download directory to specifically the rmbg onyx file. And now all I need to do is I need to repeat that for each of the files that I want to download, which Copilot got the names wrong, but has the general ID here. This is actually going to be not rmbg. This is going to be called u2net. And then this is going to be called modnet. And these are just names of models that I found from Hugging Face that do a good job at being able to identify objects and separate foreground from background. So nothing fancy here. U2net. And then this one's going to be called modnet. So with those in place, hold on, I've got an error here. Make sure. Oh, yep, that's wrong. If I could learn how to type. Okay. Now with these in place, now what we should see is when we run that same build command, we should come back here and we should actually see those files have been downloaded. So let's go ahead and run .NET build source. You can see I'm downloading the models. It's taking longer. The step's taking longer, right? Because it's actually having to download these relatively large files. Like I said, the largest one's about half a gig. And so now if I open up my files directory, I should have 3 files all named as I named them in this output, and they are all sourced from these URLs, right? So now every time my project builds, we're going to grab these files. The only problem with that approach is I probably don't need to download them every time I build if they're already there. So let's add a condition here to our exec commands that take care of that for us. So we actually only want to run this condition if that file doesn't exist. Thank you, Copilot, for being helpful. We'll add this one down here as well. And we'll do some formatting. Like that. And last time, somebody's probably watching this and be like, hey, use a macro, you're a NeoVim. I'm sorry, I haven't got to that skill level yet. So now we'll only actually try to download these if they're not already there, right? So if someone clones our repo and they do .NET build, we'll download them that first time, but we won't continue to download them if they're already on disk. And this will work great in CI/CD where I don't have to check these into my repo. I can just check my repo out. I can run .NET build or .NET restore or .NET test, any of those commands that are going to build my project. And before they build my project, they're going to grab the files. Okay, so now what we should be able to do is we should be able to say write all this out, right? Write all. And so we should be able to run this now, and our test should actually pass. So let's go ahead and try that. .NET. Actually, let's remove the, just as a good litmus test, let's actually remove BGR source, BGR, console, resources, files, remove them all, okay? And now let's go ahead and .NET test source. And so my expectation originally when I did this was that this should work now, right? Because I'm downloading these files, I'm still embedding all the files that are in that particular directory into my project. My test should pass, right? There's a little bit of a foreshadowing happening here, isn't there? They didn't pass, okay? And the reason for this is because the embedded resources attribute in my csproj file is actually being parsed really, really early. Oh, I've made NeoVim angry again. Is actually being parsed really, really early on in the build process. And so I actually have to change the way I'm declaring those embedded resources. So let me go ahead and navigate back to my solution here. Open this up in NeoVim. And so what I need to do here is I actually need to go into my csproj and I need to change where I'm defining those embedded resources. So what I need to do is I don't want this to be evaluated really, really early. I want this to be evaluated once this target and those exec commands have finished running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the item group from there, and I'm actually going to put it inside my target. Nope, that's not what I want. I want that. So now we'll download those files or make sure those files are downloaded already. Then we'll worry about doing the embedding of the resources. So let's go ahead and write all out. Actually, let's write quit all. Let's once again remove those files. So we'll say BGR console, resources files, remove them. Now what we'll do is we'll run .NET test source, and now we should download the models and we should be able to correctly embed them, so our test should pass this time. That's what I'm hoping. And there we go. Through the magic of editing, that only actually took a couple seconds instead of the 57 seconds it shows, but there we go. Now my test passed. And that's because the way we defined our target now works correctly. So we go and fetch the models, then we embed them, instead of trying to reference embedding them super early in the build process before we actually hit the target where we download them. And that one actually had me stuck for a little while, but I luckily was able to figure it out. So let's just review this again real quick. So all I did was, in my csproj file, I added some commands to actually go and grab and download the models first here. I make sure that my download directory exists, and then after I download the models, I actually embed them into my assembly. So I think this is just a really great example of how csproj files can actually be pretty powerful tools that you can use to make your build process much more simpler, and not have to actually use some sort of external, maybe PowerShell script or shell script, because you can do a lot of that same work here in your csproj file using custom targets like this, or the built-in targets that are already available to us. If this was helpful, let me know. Leave a comment. Find me on Bluesky. I'd love to know. Maybe I'm not even doing this really well and you have an idea of how I could do this better. I'd love to hear that too. So yeah, I will see you guys in the next video, or live, or short, whenever I see you again.